When you think of classic Hollywood horror films, the first thought that probably comes to your mind are either Dracula or Frankenstein. But there is one other that has been lost to time: London After Midnight, starring the man in the beaver hat. Can a film make you go crazy? Can images projected on the silver screen cause you to snap and commit unspeakable atrocities? The debate about whether or not works of art can cause violence is a long one, which is why today we'll be going all the way back to the year 1927. It was the height of the Roaring Twenties. The stock market had yet to crash. Hemingway, Lovecraft, and Woolf were publishing classics, and film was transitioning out of the silent era. Movies such as The Jazz Singer and to a lesser extent Sunrise brought sound into cinema, changing movies forever. But even though talkies would quickly overtake silent films, Hollywood was still mass producing them. This brings us to the topic of this video, London After Midnight, a feature-length horror film that united icons of the era: director Todd Browning and actor Lon Chaney. The film is about a vampire and begins with the mysterious suicide of a man named Roger Balfour. Jump forward 5 years and we are introduced to a pale woman and the now iconic man with sharp teeth and a beaver hat, who move into Balfour's old residence. What's strange is that upon observing their lease, they realize that they signed it as the man who committed suicide all those years prior. This prompts a detective/hypnotist from Scotland Yard named Professor Burke to investigate, and as the movie progresses, we discover that this detective is much more involved in the case than the audience originally thought. What follows is a convoluted story with some strange twists and an early example of a fourth wall break in a film. Essentially, it's a murder mystery, and not unlike a Sherlock Holmes style story that disguises itself as a vampire film, with a famous monster that scared audiences across the world when originally released. But if that's all it was, then why is there supposedly a curse on the film? Well, it turns out that shortly after the movie was released, a man named Robert Williams brutally murdered a woman with a razor. Police found him disoriented and covered with blood. At his trial, Williams stated that Lon Chaney's character possessed him and forced him to commit this heinous crime. His defense was that the image of the man in the beaver hat was so haunting, so cursed, that it drove him to evil. Thankfully, the jury didn't seem to buy his story. After initially sentencing him to death, he was instead ordered to spend the rest of his life in a mental institution. But that didn't stop the public from associating the film with real-life violence, and it led to people wondering if this new art form of moving pictures could turn people into maniacs. This is a concern that is all too familiar to anyone that has ever played video games. Likely it was born out of fear of a new art form. But London After Midnight may have sought this infamy, as it covered topics that were taboo in film at the time, namely suicide. Infamous or not, the film was a resounding box office success, even if the critics weren't too impressed by it. Lon Chaney's rendition of the man in the beaver hat became a horror icon, and all the horror fans in the audience fell in love with vampires, leading to director Todd Browning to go on to direct the classic Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi. Browning would also remake London After Midnight in 1935 as a talkie called Mark of the Vampire. Over the decades, with the notoriety the film has built up, many have been interested in watching London After Midnight for themselves to see if it does, in fact, cause viewers to become insane. The problem that these curious cinema lovers would quickly find out is that they can't actually watch it as it's lost media. You need to understand that silent movies such as London After Midnight were shot on nitrate film. Sometimes a single spark is all you would need to light a reel on fire, and it could not easily be put out. Couple that with studios housing warehouses full of these films, often in subpar conditions, and it's no surprise that many of these archives went up in flames. It was in one of these studio fires that the negative of London After Midnight was destroyed. On May 13th, 1967, MGM's Vault No. 7 caught on fire and burned down, destroying all the studio's copies of the film. With this news, many thought to check with the US government to see if they held a copy for legal purposes. You see, when a studio acquires a copyright for one of their films, they would send a reel to the Copyright Office, where it's stored in the Library of Congress. The thing is, this wasn't the case for nitrate films due to their flammable nature. The Library of Congress did not have safe storage for nitrate movies as they didn't want to chance any fires, so they would just send the film prints back to the studios after registering the copyright, leaving no chance that a copy of the film could be in storage in Washington. And considering this was an age before home video, it wasn't likely any fans of the movie had a copy either. So London After Midnight was therefore declared lost media. On top of this, it turns out many of the other films from the silent era are also lost to time as well. We'll explore this phenomenon next after a brief word from our sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. Imagine being caught in the middle of an epic struggle that raged for thousands of years. You'll fight noble kings and dark wizards. That is the plot of Raid Shadow Legends. By using the link below, you'll uncover prophecies, curses, betrayals, and meet more than 12 warring factions. My personal favorite faction are the Barbarians, made up of various tribes and cultures that got kicked out of their ancestral land by aggressive civilizations. Once you get started in the game, you're able to summon champions at the tavern, join a clan, and then finally jump into a couple of PvP arena battles for yourself. On top of this, Raid just released their biggest update ever, the main event being Doom Tower, which has 120 floors, a bunch of secret challenge rooms, and 12 bosses to take on. If you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description, and if you are a new player, you'll get your free Void Champion Bulwark. Not only that, but you'll also get 50 gems, an XP booster, some energy refills, and even an ancient shard. You can find me in-game under the name TheGamerFromMars, and if you're quick enough, you'll even be able to join my clan. And it's that easy, just click the link in the description, and I'll see you in the game. While there's been a lot of effort put into finding London After Midnight, the reality of the situation is the horror classic isn't alone in its lost media category, because it is estimated that a staggering 90% of silent films are lost, and 70 to 75% are thought to be lost forever. That's an estimated 11,000 feature films. It might seem crazy now, but film preservation wasn't a concern of movie studios back then. In fact, many movies weren't even lost in fires, but instead were destroyed by studios to make space in their vaults and recycle the silver in the film stock. In other cases, movies were disposed of because the star of the films had been disgraced. This was the case for Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. He was accused in 1921 of the assault and killing of a woman, and even though he was eventually exonerated, the studio spent no time erasing his presence from the motion pictures by destroying almost every film he was a part of. It's a shame that much of this turbulent time in film is completely lost to history, but in the case of London After Midnight, there have been major attempts to rediscover the lost horror classic. In 2002, Turner Classic Movies produced a semi-reconstruction of the film using still photographs and promotional pictures that have been dug up. They were able to piece it together quite accurately because the script still exists and is publicly available online. The reconstruction ran for only 45 minutes, 24 minutes shorter than the original motion picture, but it's the closest thing we currently have to the movie today. The real question is there any possibility that this lost movie might still be found? And will we ever get to see the film as it was intended? Rumors of existing reels pop up every now and again, giving hope to horror fans that they might finally be able to see this classic work. One such rumor was that in the 1980s, a film delivery service employee asked a clerk in a Los Angeles warehouse about a movie called The Hypnotist. When he opened the film can, he saw that the reel was actually labeled London After Midnight. It doesn't appear he did anything else with the film, and with no no real proof of it ever happening, experts remain skeptical of the story. Decades later in 2017, after many started to lose faith in the search, a new lead appeared from Robert Parigi, a producer on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., who shared a post to his Facebook account stating, "I'm noticing chatter that a 7-reel print of long-lost Todd Browning/Lon Chaney film London After Midnight, featuring Chaney's iconic Man in the Beaver Hat vampire, has been discovered in Spain. I had long heard rumors of a print in Cuba. Is this perhaps that print now sent to Spain? 20 years ago, I heard rumors of a print in the US and contacted the supposed owner offering to transfer it to then state-of-the-art D1. But when it came time to produce the film, he backed out." As mentioned in the post, there has always been chatter of wealthy film collectors having a copy of the lost movie, and for unknown reasons chose not to share it publicly. In 1995, a film archive in the Canary Islands received what appeared to be nitrate frames from London After Midnight, sent to them from a private party. Although just frames from the film and not the film itself, it gave fans a glimmer of hope that there might indeed be remaining prints somewhere. Still, to this day, nothing more than random murmurs from the film community have surfaced, and it seems like London After Midnight is fated to be lost forever. While currently we might not be able to watch it, there's no doubt it has left a sizable mark in pop culture. The image of Lon Chaney's character inspired the look of the Babadook, and the legendary curse surrounding London After Midnight served as a plot point in the television series Whitechapel. It's great to enjoy these odes to the missing classic, and even with naysayers, there are others that have hope that there will eventually be a copy of it released because of its notoriety. And even if this said copy is damaged, new technology can help them restore the prints. For an example of this, let's look at the trilogy of films thought to be lost at one point, the Apu trilogy. In 1993, a nitrate explosion at the Henderson Film Laboratories in South London sparked a fire that badly burned the film prints for the acclaimed trilogy. They were thought to be so badly damaged that they were unusable, making them join the many other thousands of films thought to be lost to history. That was until 2013, when the Criterion Collection completely restored the Apu trilogy, reconstructing the damaged motion pictures with modern technology. It wasn't as simple as just scanning the burned films into some sort of program though. Technicians spent hundreds of hours painstakingly slicing off burned edges of the damaged film and replacing them so that the movie could easily pass through digital scanners. And even after cleaning, restoring, and scanning the negatives, their work was far from finished. It turns out that whole parts of the trilogy were lost in the fire, so they had to scour the world for usable copies in archives, private collections, and more. Once they obtained the additional prints, they created digital timelines of the classics to find out where the scenes fit into the collection. After that, they then compared all their prints in order to decide which had the best version of whatever scenes they needed. They then extracted the necessary parts and fit them into the master timeline like a puzzle. Even though they now had Frankenstein together complete copies of the movies, there were now distinct visual differences between various prints and reels while watching through. To make all the footage match, restoration artists and color graders worked hard to bridge everything together, vastly improving the quality of the film scans, restoring the audio tracks, and made the films feel like one complete piece. With the help of this team of dedicated film lovers, they brought back these movies from the dead, releasing the restored edition in 2015 to fanfare from the entire Kino community. It gave many hope that reels of lost media that were in poor condition could be restored with this new technology. Organizations and people such as Arbelos, Martin Scorsese, and the Criterion Collection worked tirelessly to preserve and restore movies. So perhaps there is hope that one of these groups can find and resurrect London After Midnight if it does emerge. But sadly, nothing can be done if no prints of the film exist. All we can do right now is hope that someone somewhere has a copy. Until then, we're left with some photos, legends, a possible curse, and of course, the haunting image of the man with the beaver hat. It should be noted, if you want to see more classic films restored, it's always best to support the companies that are trying to make it happen. And maybe someday we'll get London After Midnight released. But until then, the search continues. So until next time, thanks for watching.